Welcome back to our next lecture. Today we're finally going to talk about the second part of the title of our course, the limits to growth, sustainability and the circular economy. So we're going to talk about the circular economy in detail. But before we dive into the circular economy itself, we're first going to talk about our current economic system, the linear economy that we're using, and then a deep dive into the circular economy before moving towards the performance economy. Before we get started, we're going to recap an important definition that's going to be relevant for the subsequent concepts that we're going to talk about. So previously, we defined sustainability as follows. It's a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And when we dissected this definition a little bit more and thought about examples and further implications, we also ended up with this idea that the most sustainable thing you can do is to consume nothing at all, or at least to consume less. Keep that in mind when we're now diving into our current economic system, the linear economy, or also the linear industrial economy. The linear industrial economy, which starts on the left side of the figure, where we extract resources that we then use to manufacture certain goods. Those are subsequently distributed and then they are sold and then used by the consumer. So you're extracting, producing, distributing, then selling and using those goods. You can also cut that short, and then the linear economy is pretty much just take, make, and dispose. Take resources, make something out of them, use them, and then you throw things away. Doesn't sound very sustainable if you think about it in the context of our previous sustainability definition. Besides this rather intuitive or short form of a definition, we also have, of course, a proper definition for the linear economy or the linear industrial economy as provided by Stahl. He defines it as follows. Its objectives are to maintain value, not to create value added, to optimize stock management, not flows, and to increase the efficiency of using goods, not of producing goods. So in short, produce as much as possible for as little cost as possible, and then once you're done using it, you just throw it away. And especially this dispose part is a major challenge in the linear economy. So this waste management as a last step, because you need to handle this waste somehow. Another problem is illustrated in this figure where you can see the liability border. So when you have a manufacturer that's producing a certain good, it crosses the liability border at the point where the product is sold to the customer or user. So think about Apple producing an iPhone and then selling you the iPhone. Sure, they still make some money by selling you apps or some other services of their ecosystem, but with respect to the iPhone, they already made their money. They're not interested in this iPhone anymore. So they would be interested in selling you yet another iPhone, but that iPhone that they already sold, its business is done, they have their money. That also means that they do not really care whether the product is very difficult to dispose of, that it's even hazardous maybe, or dangerous or complicated in a certain way, because they already made their money, there's no liability left for the manufacturer anymore. The user has to make sure to correctly dispose of the device at hand. And this is what the liability order is about. But back to the waste management as a last step. We already talked about this in the previous videos that we are very bad at managing our waste. So either just dumping trash right into the ocean or into a fjord, or building up huge landfills where we have more trash than we can ever process or like recover again. Or the great idea of dumping nuclear waste into the Atlantic Ocean without putting them in proper barrels in the first place, or that we don't really have a clue how to properly handle nuclear waste. Especially in that context that thus far only 2 generations profited from cheap nuclear energy, but the next 40,000 generations will have to live with the waste that those 2 generations created. We also already talked about plastic waste, that you're eating or consuming about 2,000 tiny plastic pieces every week, which is roughly a credit card worth of plastic trash that you consume once a week. And that also recycling is not the perfect solution for all this waste problem that we have, because recycling requires a lot of energy. We talked about that. It's more sustainable to not have to recycle something in the first place. Some materials can also not be recycled yet. Impurities are challenging. You often need a lot of manual labor to sort through the recycling materials. And the recycled material also has often lower quality than the original input material. And it gives you a false sense of safety to just assume, yeah, there is waste, but we're just going to recycle it. And as I stated before, I'm not saying you should stop recycling. Recycling is great, but it's much, much better if there is nothing to recycle in the first place, which brings us back to the most sustainable thing that you can do is to consume less. So recycling is not going to cut it. Therefore, we need to do something else to address those main challenges of the linear economy. The main challenges of the linear economy, we first of all have, of course, this waste and environmental pollution problem, not just when we dispose products or resources that we used, but already at the take and make phase as well. So when we're extracting resources from the environment, it usually goes hand in hand with environmental pollution, like extracting things from a mine or something similar. Same goes for the manufacturing process, where potentially hazardous fluids or other things might be discharged into the environment. So taking causes environmental pollution and waste, making causes environmental pollution and waste, and then using the product as well as disposing the product does the same. So the waste of resources is one of the major problems here, as well as environmental pollution and waste in itself. And recycling is not going to do it on itself. Another way to look at this is to consider waste as an inefficiency, because you initially put a lot of resources and energy into producing that waste in the first place, and now you're just discharging it without using it anymore. That is pretty wasteful, especially in the context of the sustainability definition that we recapped at the beginning of this video. So in order to address the main challenges of the linear economy, we have to first figure out how to use less in the first place, but also once we have extracted resources and made them into products, make those things last as long as possible to maximize the resource utilizations of resources that we already have. And this is where the linear economy connects with a circular economy. So we're not only having a take, make, use and dispose part, but we're rather thinking about how to address this waste problem and this resource utilization challenge in a more circular manner, so that we do not have a linear process anymore, but rather a circular approach.